Perhaps one of the most recognizable light mechs in the history of the Inner Sphere and Battletech, and most certainly for the Capellan Confederation. In this video, we are going to be examining a mech that changed the very face of warfare, and changed the entire nature of the Capellan Confederation's armed forces. The production and introduction of this one machine can be seen as a major turning point for the Confederation, and many of the lessons this mech embodied were later understood by other houses around them. Now appearing on our sensors, far too late to intervene with its operation, let us begin to examine Hellespont Mechworks. Raven. A light mech weighing in at 35 tons, the Raven would make an enormous splash in the Inner Sphere in its rushed debut in the Fourth Succession War. While this didn't turn the tide of the war during this period, what it did do was display innovation in the mech space. Much like the Cataphract, the Raven was built by a desperate state, truly one which was attempting at all costs to match its peers. Not since the Star League had anyone attempted to build a machine that was quite as sophisticated or bold, at least not within the context of electronic warfare. The origin of this new chassis and Battlemech is intertwined with the Confederation's desire to redress the balance between its two powerful neighbors, the Free Worlds League and the Federated Suns, as it could truthfully match neither in material or overall military terms. A brand new electronic warfare system was produced after years of dedicated, hard work attempting to replicate the Star League's Guardian ECM system and Beagle Active Probe. This was finally done near the end of the Third Succession War, but there was a massive problem. Originally envisioned as these systems being installed in a multitude of mechs of every weight class, most of them simply could not fit this new bulky system into their chassis. Gone was the immediate vision of Crusaders or Vindicators installing such devices in their frames, and using it as an edge to outwit and outfight their Federated Sons and Free Worlds adversaries. But the technology would not be allowed to simply lay inert, and instead of abandoning this overall prospect, a new design was proposed, one which specifically housed these advanced systems and acted as a recon asset and stealth vanguard. One which could use this technology to the fullest, and to complement the rest of the CCAF as a force multiplier. That theorized mech would eventually culminate in a new design, known as the Raven 1X. During the Fourth Succession War, Ravens were considered to be essential to any chance that the Capellans may have in the war itself, and were meant to be deployed at the company level. This, in practice, never took place though. Not enough of these were produced, and instead they were attached at the battalion level, being shifted to different battles or units in the front as needed to either provide support, or to use its advanced systems as a recon asset or behind-the-scenes combatant. This would, unfortunately for House Liao, not work out in their favor. The overwhelming force of the now, in essence, Federated Commonwealth simply smashed through any delicate or dedicated plans the Confederation put in place. And most humiliatingly of all, large numbers of Ravens were captured, with their secrets and technologies being harvested for Davions to dissect on New Avalon. Worse still, they would even be used against their masters during the conflict, as the AFFS discovered the immense value these mechs provided them, and they would use captured examples to such a large extent that some observers in the Fourth Succession War actually believed these mechs to be a brand new Federated Sun design, rather than a Capellan one. There is no way to describe the Capellans' woes in the Fourth Succession War as anything short of a crippling defeat. It would lose an enormous amount of its territories, and the majority of its heavy manufacturing. Once the Confederation limped along, producing a smattering of Highlanders from salvaged and restored chassis, from anyone who found them, as well as producing the very much capable Cataphract Mech, an all-purpose heavy which was forced to moonlight as an assault in their forces. What they didn't lose, however, was the ability to manufacture light assets such as the Raven, or medium assets like the respected Vindicator Battlemech. It would be the Raven who would truly be one of the great saviors of the Capellan state with the March of Time. With the Confederation being put on a defensive footing, and almost entirely dependent on lighter assets in order to operate, at least for some time after the Fourth Succession War, the Raven came to embody the spirit of innovation, cooperation, and a new battlefield approach that they would need to master. To start this path, the Raven would become more common, and their design would become more sophisticated with time. These shadowy figures would be used in multiple small-scale operations, including raids on their now venomously despised enemies in the Federated Commonwealth, acting as a hybrid between a military asset and an intelligence one, embodying this new hybrid warfare the Confederation now required in order to desperately survive. Often it would be ravens at the tip of many spears in terms of raiding operations for vital components and technologies in order to keep House Liao in almost any kind of standing with the vastly superior neighbors it had. To understand the next great contribution of the Raven, one must understand the political and economic realities of this era for the Capellan Confederation as well. Now, as much of a footnote in history as the Federated Commonwealth itself, there was a counterbalance to this political union. Comstar would front and assist with organizing what is known as the Concord of Kapteyn. While none of the great houses showed any love for one another, save for now Steiner and Davion, the other three houses recognized their immediate plight, which was the united front from the two most powerful houses in the Inner Sphere. This tripartite alliance would be formalized in 3024, and was a mutual defense pact as well as an economic and development treaty. Prior to the Fourth Succession War, industrial and military aid was being exchanged between these houses. Despite the accord being an absolute military failure due to an inability for it to coordinate between its member states, as well as its disastrous showing as a result in the Fourth Succession War, the intelligence, development, and economic aid of the pact proved to be a staggering success for the houses who participated in it. Where the Raven comes in is quite simple. This example of trade and development was by no means one-sided. Members needed to prove their worth, and the Raven proved its worth in terms of arms sales in the years that would follow. Large numbers of Ravens were exported to the Free Worlds League, and later to the Draconis Combine, adding to their lethal capabilities, especially as the Raven itself became more sophisticated with time. This stealthy, but failed wonder weapon was no longer something that only appeared within the diminished, understrength arsenal of the Capellan Confederation, but was now appearing in the far more robust and capable forces of the Free Worlds League military and Draconis Combine mustered soldiery, in very measurable and significant numbers. They would play their role, and play their role well, in raids during the War of 3039, as well as in the interwar years both before and after this major conflict, though this would happen almost exclusively for House Liao, as exports of the Raven didn't truly get started until much closer to the clan invasion to their allies. The Raven, in other words, became a fantastically successful export model, and provided the Confederation with an influx of money, or even heavier battlemechs which it could offer these and other advanced machines for from their allied states in trade and barter. Due to their availability in the Combine with export models, and due to captured examples in the Federated Commonwealth, the Raven too would be at the forefront of the fighting of the clan invasion as well, something it was never designed or equipped to do, but accounts from this era can back up its performance, especially in its supporting role. There are more than a few Smoke Jaguar, Jade Falcon, Steel Viper, and Nova Cat clan warriors who met their end. Perhaps not directly from the Raven, but most definitely indirectly from them. But with the passing of this era of warfare, the Raven would participate in perhaps the greatest moment of restoration for House Liao, namely Chancellor Sun Tzu Liao and Captain General Thomas Hallis's venture into the Chaos March. This campaign would be a vicious one, disrupting the entire core of the Inner Sphere, and seeing the Federated Commonwealth's grip on it forever shattered, eventually resulting in an escalation of the Federated Commonwealth's internal disputes and dissolution. The humble Raven would play its role well in the campaign, as well as many other new and restored Capellan designs. It is ironic, perhaps, that it was the Raven of all vehicles that so embodies in many ways the return to power of House Liao. With the reconquest and restoration of much of what had been lost in the Forced Succession War, the Capellan Confederation would evolve over the next century into not the sick man of the Inner Sphere, but into its most powerful belligerent. All with its pet Raven, acting as its eyes, ears, and not too subtle knife, against all those who attempted to intervene against this inevitable conclusion. Originally deployed in 3024, prior to many advanced technologies making their way to the forefront of Battlemech design, the RVN-1X Raven was nonetheless a sophisticated Battlemech for its time, despite using a standard internal structure, gyro, and cockpit. It's also interesting to note that the Raven does not benefit from any quirks in a meaningful way. The only one it has is the unfortunate no arms quirk, which means that if this 35-ton Maverick is knocked over, it may have more than a little bit of trouble pulling itself back up. This applies across the board to all Raven chassis variants. Speed is life to most light mechs, and while the 1X is far from the slowest 35-ton Battlemech in its era, it isn't exactly fast, instead relying on its electronic warfare system to keep it safe. It is powered by an OMI 175 Fusion Standard engine, giving it a maximum speed of 86 km per hour, or 8 movement points in the tabletop game. For the Succession Wars, this is not a terrible level of movement, but the Raven at this stage of its development pushed technology more than it does function, and we'll be going over some of its key issues relating to movement later. For a 35-ton mech, the Raven isn't particularly well armed, though it does have some merits to its punching power for its time of development and weight. While there are more heavily armed 35-tonners, such as the Firestarter, Panther, or Jenner, it would be exceptionally foolish to ignore what the Raven can deliver. First, it has 12 standard heatsinks to keep itself cool for heat management, which is enough for it to run and fire all of its weapons without overheating. It can alpha strike without any concern. To get to the main course, it has a pair of Kara's Arms medium lasers in its right arm and provides it with armor punch-through ability at close range. And it also possesses the formidable Harpoon 6 SRM launcher, or SRM-6, to give it scatter damage against targets it engages. This makes the Raven's weapons package incredibly short-ranged in the tabletop, with a maximum threat distance of 9 hexes, or 270 meters. Though this is quite frequent among light mechs in this era, and also reflects the hopes that the electronic warfare system will keep it alive. The Raven gambles its entire design on one principle, which is that its advanced electronic systems can keep it safe, as well as support its fellow units on the field. This, unfortunately, is not likely to be the case with the introductory model. With 7.5 tons dedicated to its electronic warfare system, which is housed in the left torso, the RVN-1X is hoping that its ECM feature would be able to assist its survival on the field. Unfortunately, in the era it was launched, there are not really many Artemis 4 systems, or C3 systems, let alone NARC missile beacons. While this broad system can prevent the Raven from being, quote, detected, unquote, in some ways, it's not really going to protect it once the battle begins, especially in the tabletop game during the Succession Wars period. What's worse is it comes with only 4 tons of protective plating to keep the mech safe from incoming fire, which is about the same as a Locust. This means that the Raven is slow for its tonnage, fragile, and utterly dependent on avoiding combat in the first place. While this does work narratively in many situations, it doesn't work out quite as well in terms of implementation in the game. The RVN-1X itself is not a fantastic machine. It is mildly gunned, not particularly fast for a light mech, and under-armored, Also can have a primitive Beagle active probe and Guardian ECM working at 3 hexes overall for their range. What these do just doesn't function well in this era. It also doesn't translate particularly well to the tabletop game itself. But to judge this mech fairly as it currently is, it's simply a subpar 35-ton machine as a result. But what is more important is how the RVN-1X's legacy changed the nature of battle in the Inner Sphere. The last time this style of Battlemech had existed in the setting had been during the Star League, and it was the Capellan Confederation that would bring it back. In every house, future electronic warfare-based battlemechs and stealth machines owe much of their lineage to this particular battlemech and its innovations. Even if the base model is not very good, its contributions to the Inner Sphere far outweighs its initial outing. House Liao in the 32nd century uses an extreme amount of ECM equipment, and even stealth armor, showing just how well adapted these lessons have been learned. Despite its initial showing being less than what was desired, the Confederation and other states would continue to work on the Raven over the next century, and a number of new, capable war machines would begin to appear and emerge from this. As a result, there is a prolific number of configurations that would appear for the Raven, and in this video I will be covering several of them here. The first true variant of the Raven shown to the world would be in Technical Readout 3050, in the early 90s. And for most people from that time, the Raven they know is the RVN-3L as a result. This variant utilizes a series of advanced technologies, and refined technologies, to truly enhance its presence on the battlefield in a multitude of ways. First, an XL engine is installed, and is upgraded to a 210 XL. This increases its speed to 97 km per hour, but does make it vulnerable to being knocked out should it lose any of its side torsos. But with this speed and weight saving, the Raven would heavily invest in other spaces on board, making it a true terror in its role of recon, harassment, and using, of course, electronic warfare systems. In addition, its protection is improved to 4.5 tons of plating, but that plating is no longer standard, but instead is Hellespont light ferrofibrous, increasing its protection to 81 points of armor, approximately a 25% overall increase. While this doesn't make the Raven tough by any means, it does definitely make it more survivable than it had been in the past, and gives it more flexibility against Inner Sphere targets. Its heat sinks are also reduced to 11 standard, as it doesn't benefit from double heatsink technology, which means it can heat up slightly if it alpha strikes turn on turn, but this can be easily managed. Where things become truly fantastic though, are in the other advances made in the design. It no longer utilizes the outdated and heavy EW system it had before, and instead installs the dramatically lighter Beagle Active Probe and Guardian ECM. These two systems are less than half of the original tonnage contributed towards this, and together operate significantly better. This makes the Raven more adept at helping its allies and itself. Next, its role as a spotter would be put front and center, as it is given a NARC missile beacon, with 6 rounds of ammunition, as well as the ever-infamous and dangerous tag system. In tandem, these two systems can make targets extremely concerned about their well-being, especially if it is in support of a large volume of long-range missile platforms or Arrow 4 equipped vehicles and battlemechs. Beyond this, its firepower is the same. The 3L is a dramatic evolution over the original. It's fast, hits just as hard, has more protection both electronically and physically, as well as providing more and better support for its lance. And it can act as a lethal spotter using its tag and NARC systems, which can result in abject misery for anyone who incurs its outsourced, yet directed wrath. The next leap in progress for the Raven's contributions to the setting and to House Liao was it being used as one of the test beds to pioneer the most stunning protective systems in the entirety of Battletech. House Liao's most prized technology, even if it is now extended past its borders. That being, of course, stealth armor. Stealth armor is, in many ways, the biggest game changer to come out in terms of armored protection. Perhaps only rivaled with ferro-lamellar armor in this role, stealth armor approaches defense in a different way from other armor types, in that in essence it does its best to prevent the damage from happening in the first place. It requires a Guardian ECM to operate, and does generate heat every turn it is activated, but while active, the target itself is just flatly significantly harder to hit at medium and long ranges. It also offers reasonable protection per ton as well. It doesn't take up as much internal space as ferrofibrous armor, at least of the inner sphere variety. A common staple of the Dark Age for many Capellan mechs, as well as bleeding into other realms and even the clans. The 4L would be one of the first mechs to have this applied to its chassis. The 4L utilizes 6 tons of this plating, and has a total of 96 points of protection as a result. In order to deal with the extra heat, it comes equipped with double heat sinks, unlike the 3L, and is now also equipped with twin ER medium lasers instead of normal medium lasers. Beyond this, it is very much similar to the 3L. Still, a fantastic upgrade, and one of the best mechs of its time and weight. This is where the Raven reaches its next level of potential in the 31st century, and would be deployed as of 3062. Once again, the Raven is at the forefront of innovation. In the 32nd century, the Raven's place was uncertain for some time. The Capellan Confederation would release the Raven II, its intended successor, another capable mech in its own regard, and the Raven line seemed to be left in the cold. It would slowly be used up and then left at the wayside of history. Only that is not what happened. The RVN-5L would enter service in 3125 and would be built as a companion to the Raven II. Its engine size was increased to an enormous 280XL engine, giving it a much higher maximum speed of over 120 km per hour. It also would install an XL gyro in an attempt to save more weight. Its ECM is upgraded to the latest generation, the Angel variant, and would maintain its ever-dangerous stealth armor. Amalgamating its armor and speed makes for a deadly and frustrating combination, where at longer ranges, where the Raven would likely wish to perch itself, it can now be almost impossible to get a positive lock on it. Principally designed as a dedicated spotter and partner in crime to the Raven II, this surprisingly deadly asset supports its traditional tag, as well as a new improved NARC system. This new NARC system is superior to the original, and makes missiles yet more deadly from its allied forces. With its superior speed, this new Raven is even less likely to engage targets directly, simply needing to consistently harass them by providing coordinates for more powerful local forces, whether they be artillery, LRM support vehicles, or support mechs. Perhaps its biggest weakness is that it has 3 one-shot SRM-2 launchers, replacing its original SRM-6, though this is truthfully not as large of an issue as one might think. Every time the Raven seems bound for obscurity, in every age, it seems to find a way to escape its conundrum once more. The Raven is one of the most consequential mechs designed since the fall of the Star League. It changed the way mechs are designed as a whole from the time of the original launch in 3024, and was responsible for dragging a whole school of doctrines and warfare back into relevancy. Each generation of Raven has since pushed advanced technologies, and has doubled down on its stealth and advanced roles to further enhance the design. And the Capellan Confederation armed forces. The Raven pioneered electronic warfare in the Fourth Succession War. It then went on to engage with new, advanced electronic systems for the Inner Sphere during the Clan invasion. The Raven was unsurprisingly one of the first designs to utilize House Liao's new stealth armor, and once more change the nature of warfare. Where the Raven treads, new technologies and innovation as well as tactics follow in its wake. Despite other mechs such as the Cataphract, Highlander, Lu Huibing, and many others getting credit for much of Liao's success, and it is often well deserved, it is perhaps the humble Raven which has made the single greatest contribution to the Chancellor's power in the Inner Sphere. If I may be so bold, it may in fact be the single most important Inner Sphere Battlemech of the 31st century, which is remarkable when one looks at the seemingly humble Raven. But the Raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if it had a soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have glow before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Thank you for joining me here today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. I do updates very frequently, and you'll be happy with the content, I think. Also, a huge thank you to all the YouTube members for this channel. When you hit the join button and become a member, you take an extra step in supporting the content on this channel, and I can't thank you enough. Because this content is only possible because of viewers like you. And with that, I will catch all of you in the comment section below.